simulators, all that sort of thing, and then we started the flying. And then, as now, it was 3 sorties dual with an instructor, and the 4th sortie was in the single-seater, and that was my first solo. And it was late July 1984. And the thing I remember about it, that it didn't occur to me why nobody told me. I remember getting into this aeroplane, and I was really aware of the intakes next to me. And that had never happened to me before. I'd flown the Hawk, and the intakes are all the way behind the instructor in the back. And the jet promised, okay, they were right, but the bloke was sitting there as well. And even though you got to fly these aeroplanes solo, you were still always aware of the seat there, even though it was empty. Or, of course, if you were dual, you were aware of the instructor being there as well. I can remember sitting there, strapping in, and all I could hear was my heart beating in my brain. And that's all. I had no perception of anything else. It was tremendously exciting. And I remember sort of looking over the sides and being aware that there was no other seat behind me. There was nowhere for anybody else to sit in this aeroplane. There was just one seat, and I was in it. And I remember taxiing out to the end of the runway, and I'd got the other guy of the course we'd taken pictures of each other as a souvenir, and I was sort of waving to him as I taxied past, terrified really of what I was about to go and do. But you know, they don't send you solo unless they're happy for you to go. I remember sitting on the end of the runway and releasing the brakes and lighting the reheats, and this thing rumbling down the runway, and I was suddenly aware of how much the pitot probe was wiggling around. You know, it was really bouncing, wobbling like this, and nobody ever told me it was going to do that. And I thought, there's something wrong with this, you know, it's going to break off. And it just does it, you know, and nobody told me. And now when I send lads solo, and I'm at the other end, I'm now an instructor here, and I send people solo, and I point this out to him. And I say, the first thing I was aware of was how much the pitot probe wobbles back and forward as you're rumbling down the runway, and it was completely distracting. But yeah, that was my first solo. It was about 45 minutes to an hour, and it was big stuff. It was get airborne, fly low level around Scotland at 500 feet, come back and bash the circuit. It was fantastic. It was probably the best story I've ever had in my life. We pride ourselves by hopefully providing the best standard of flying instruction available in the world. We go to great pains to make sure that the people we get here who are learning to fly this aeroplane as ab initio students, for want of a better word, they don't get here because they're rubbish. They get here because they deserve to. They get the plum posting, single seat aeroplane. They have to cope with the workload by themselves. And if it's all going to worms, but you can recover it to that situation, fine, that's what I'm happy about. And if you bust a height, I don't mind, as long as you recover smoothly to the original height. What I'm not interested in is a yuggy old guy who's going to lose a wingman. Okay, so keep it smooth, keep it safe, and we'll be there. To that end, they must be reciprocated by the best flying instruction available, in my opinion. The lads come here, and they'll go through their simulators, and they'll go through their ground school, and then they'll run through a 4-month course that lasts approximately 80 hours. And they'll be taken from an initial conversion onto the aircraft right the way through, and when they leave here, they're flying in 4-ship tactical formations at low level against simulated targets with an enemy aircraft or 2 enemy aircraft simulated, jumping into the formation to try and spoil their timing, their route planning, to get them to deviate from the black line on the map, and their job is to then regain it and get to the target on time. A massive learning curve over 4 months. We've got, you know, young people coming through who need to be taught this amount of information in this period of time. And we have to work out how best to do it. The syllabus is laid down. We've got a book of sorties. The guy has to learn this, that, and the other, A, B, C, on this sortie. Go out and teach it as best as you can. And hopefully, by the time you come down, the individual has grasped all the learning points.
Well, I think air displays are important overall to the RAF because it's something for all our pilots to strive towards doing. It gives them something to aim for, and I must say in a job like this on an operational conversion unit, on 16 Squadron in particular, the flying can become after a while slightly repetitive because you're teaching ab initio pilots to fly the aeroplane. And I think for each of our instructors here to be able to strive towards a display is actually a good target for them to aim at. And I think that having a display aircraft for each of our aircraft types shows not only inwardly to our own people in the Air Force that our standards are just as high as they ever were. I think it actually does a lot of good in the eye of the public, and it allows the public to see actually why we do all the training we do and why we do it the way we do it, and they see the end result, which is an air display is not necessarily a tactical display of what we can do, but it certainly shows off the skill level and the skills that all our pilots train for and hone themselves up to. And I think from that point of view, it's good for us to show the public what we can do. I think Andy really shows off the aircraft to its limit, and that's purely through Andy's own skill. I mean, he's a first-class aviator, a first-class pilot, and a first-class instructor. And I really do think that Andy is doing a fine job as the Jaguar display pilot. And really, that's all I can say. He's a damn fine pilot. I wish I had half a dozen of them.
The Jaguar display is it's run on the basis of all displays. What you have is a line of people, and these people have to be entertained. Now, the line can be one person over 100 yards or 250,000 people standing 10 deep over 3 miles, or I don't know, a couple of hundred people in a football pitch. The line of the display is always different. And what you have to do when you're putting a display together is make sure that when something happens, it's in front of the people. If you've got a long, thin line of people, then you've got to share out the good deals. You can't just have things happening right in the centre, and the poor individuals who've also paid their money at either end, they don't get to see anything. And this is what the display is based on. Now, the aeroplane is not the world's best turning aeroplane. Small wings, mounted high on the shoulder. It's designed to go fast, low, in a straight line. It's not designed to turn. So we've helped ourselves a bit by stripping it down so we can get the best turning ability out of the aircraft. However, it's still too large to keep it within the confines of the crowd line, if you like. So what I've done is I've put dumbbells either end, wing overs, if you like. Some rolling underneath, some in the normal sense, but primarily they are a means to an end, so that you have something happening in front of the crowd for the whole of the crowd length. Okay? So you've got your wing over at left, your wing over at right, and in the middle something dynamic is happening. What I've tried to do here is show the aeroplane in the best light possible and provide comparisons. I've put in a slow roll because the aeroplane looks good doing a slow roll. I've put in a more complicated maneuver, which we call the 5, and it's a 4-point roll interrupted halfway through with an aileron roll in the middle from upside down to upside down, and then finish the 4-point, 3 and 4. Then we get to the comparison stage. Come around the dumbbell and do a high-speed run, show how the airplane performs going fast, 600 knots, 100 feet, to then brake back. We call it brake back, which is basically get the airplane away from the crowd, get the speed off, and then come back at the other end of the speed range, 115 knots, full flap, lots of angle of attack past the crowd. And if there's a headwind, this looks particularly impressive because you fly on indicated airspeed, which doesn't take into account the headwind. If you've got a 40-knot headwind, that then changes the ground speed of the aircraft, so you can get it flying slowly across the ground at 90 miles an hour. if the wind is strong enough. Okay? And it looks like it's almost standing still on a windy day. Then another wing over and another roll into a max rate turn to show people that even though the aeroplane isn't classed as a good turning aircraft, it can still turn. So I'll stick in a max rate turn, a 360 essentially, in front of the crowd, okay, to then roll and pitch up out of the place, to then belly over and come into land. And even the landing is optimized so that the maximum number of people on the crowd line can see it, in that I'll land quite fast for the configuration of the aircraft and then juggle with the flap to keep the nose up so that the aircraft will wheelie, if you like, down the runway whilst slowing down. And it will do this across a long distance, several thousand feet, by carefully juggling with the flap and the controls. So that everyone gets to appreciate it. You don't just have a few people here, a few people there. Everybody has got to get their fair deal. I'm just lining up on the runway now, making sure the aircraft is dead straight. And I'll bring the canopy shut, pushing the lock-in handle fully forward and ensuring that the air conditioning is switched to the correct position. All the switches are in the correct place. Final check, and moving the throttles up to maximum drive power. Check the canopy, make sure it's not going to rise, so it's locked, and release. Start to accelerate and engage the reheats. Aircraft accelerates very quickly. I'm looking for 150 knots prior to rotate. At 150 knots, I'll snatch the stick back. Here it goes, up and roll. Undercarriage, coming up now, turning 60 degrees off the crowd center line. Snap roll out and pull. Rolling left underneath. And the flaps need to come up now. There they go. Air conditioning coming in. Looking back over my shoulder for the crowd center line. Throttle throwing back through the head-up display to make sure I've got the correct height and speed for the first maneuver, which is the slow roll. Aiming to roll out back on the center line at 500 feet and between 380 and 400 knots, and aiming to do a slow roll to the right. There we are, back on the center line now. Quick check and start to roll. Pushing now with both hands, upside down and being crowd center. Aiming to keep it straight all the way down. Check, and a snap roll to the right. Again, pulling 60 degrees off. You can see the vapor trails off the wingtips as the pressure changes under the G-loading. Snapping back round to the left for the next maneuver, which is a 4-point roll interrupted halfway through by a complete aileron roll. Again, looking left over my shoulder for the center line, and again aiming to be at level at 500 feet at 400 knots. Here we are, level, pause, up and roll. Just check, on the knife edge, upside down, check. Full roll, upside down and check, on the knife edge, and back upright. Need both hands for that. Back into reheat, and again 60 degrees off. You can see now the G loading on the eyelids, 5G or so, pulling up again, check, rolling underneath. Now burners in all the way for the high speed run. Looking for 600 knots at 100 feet. G loading about 5G. Here we come back to the center line, aircraft descending, level at 100 feet, now. 600 knots. And 7G brake. Idle, air brakes out to decelerate for the slow speed pass. .7G down to 5G now, coming around the corner looking for the center line for the slow speed pass. Aiming to fly the aircraft down the crowd center just above stalling speed. 300 feet, rolling out, allowing the aircraft to decelerate with full flap, air brakes in, undercarriage up. and just adjusting the throttle to maintain the speed at around about 115 to 120 knots indicated. In a headwind, this will equate to between 90 and 100 miles an hour. Looking left and right to check that I'm central, because I can't actually see over the nose because it's so high. Once a beam crowd center, I then give it a count to make sure the spacing is correct for the next maneuver. And I am checking crowd center, starting the count, and very shortly I'll be unloading and engaging the reheats. There they go. Reheats are in, flaps going from full to mid, and now pitching up to 40 degrees nose up. Looking for 1,200 feet before starting the roll to the left. This is to ensure the spacing is correct for the 270 spot roll into max rate to follow. Now looking over the shoulder to get crowd center again, and aim to run back in towards crowd center at 320 knots. There we are, running back in 500 feet, nose goes up and a 270 spot roll. Stop, pull. Max rate turn. 5G continuous, level at 500 feet. A little bit of adjustment if necessary for wind to make sure we come back out again at beam crowd center. You see I'm checking over my shoulder all the time to make sure that I'm in the right place. On the rollout, it will be a snap rollout followed by a complete 360 aileron roll. Here we go, rolling, and check and pull. Pulling to 70 degrees nose up. On finals now, checking 3 greens are down, full flap, correct hydraulic pressures, and aim to touch down in the correct position. About 200 feet now. Looking for the flare to touch down on the numbers. On the touchdown then, keeping the nose off and raising the flap to change the center of pressure to keep the nose up. Touchdown, now. Flap up, keeping the nose up. And I can then hold this position as the aircraft decelerates down to about 70 knots. At 70 knots, gently lowering the nose. Allowing the nose wheel to gently rest on the runway. There it goes. Down. Nose wheel steering engaged. I can commence braking. And clear the runway. I think my lot in life can only be described as extremely lucky. I left school at 18, joined the Air Force, and passed all the courses that I went to do with this in mind. I mean, I've finally reached where I've wanted to go. Started as a 4-year-old watching the red arrows upside down over Turnhouse. Many decades later, I'm doing it myself, not the red arrows short, but a solo display in a fast jet, going around in the summer every weekend and entertaining the paying public. That's my job at the weekends. During the week, I become a normal instructor and have to do my normal day-to-day job, and that's fine. I'm extremely fortunate to be in this position, and I wouldn't swap it with anybody or anything. Bye.